time for the Bspn Fantasy Spotlight. Along with Jeremy Vela and Mike Brigner, I'm Brett Malamud. Fantasy season is here. Who's your top pick? Who's the guy you need to have on your fantasy football team this year? Jeremy?
Well, if I was drafting and I had the first overall pick, I'm going with Adrian Peterson. He's going to have a huge bounce back year. And that Vikings offense is actually pretty good. A lot of people don't realize, but Teddy Bridgewater, he had a good season last year. They have some good receivers. I know Charles Johnson, he's going to have a few big catches for them, so they're going to have a deep threat with him. And they're going to be able to run the ball on people. The offensive line is a little bit improved. You've got Adrian Peterson, who, beast mode. I know I have beast mode, Marshawn Lynch, but Adrian Peterson, that's another guy who can just beast it. He's going to score a lot of touchdowns. I think they're going to put up a lot of points. And that's the guy who you can't miss if you have the #1 overall pick. Mike?
Now I'm thinking about this from a different perspective. I think the guy that you have to draft is Julio Jones this year. Coming back off, I don't want to say a weak season. He still had finished out great, but he was injured most of the year. So I think he's going to come back, have probably one of the best wide receiver seasons, period. Not just fantasy-wise. He could have Calvin-like year. So I think Julio Jones is the guy you want. He's going to get 1,900 yards, 13 touchdowns in that neighborhood. Him and Matt Ryan are going to hook up, and they might make it to the championship, AFC championship, not Super Bowl. Not that crazy, guys.
Now I'm going to take Andrew Luck. I'm not going to say pick him as your first overall pick, because that's where you put a wide receiver or running back, where you might take a guy like Eddie Lacy, who now has no receiver on his team with the loss of Jordy Nelson. But I'm going to value Luck higher than I value Rodgers, strictly because he has the more weapons. This is really, in the last couple of years, we've seen Andrew Luck develop into a premier quarterback. Definitely one of the elite quarterbacks we've seen in recent decades, and I think that he continues that this year.
Yeah, he throws the ball a ton, which fantasy-wise gives him great numbers. But when you look at him in the real game, he always makes me uneasy because he gets a lot of drop balls because he throws 45, 50 times a game.
And that's why it's fantasy.
Yeah.
And you take a look at their team, they have a running back core of Frank Gore, who hasn't really been the guy in recent seasons, so I really think that they do pass the ball more with Frank Gore in the backfield, knowing that they're not going to give him as many carries. So I'd value Luck right up there as your top quarterback in the league.
So who are people that you guys stay away from? Who do you stay away from when you're drafting? Who do you not want on your fantasy team this year?
All right, so the guy I'm going to stay away from this year is going to have to be Odell Beckham Jr. Now, I know he puts up some sick catches, and he puts up a lot of touchdowns, but defenses are going to be keying on him in that Giants receiver corps. Because you do have Victor Cruz, you're going to have some more weapons, you have Larry Donnell. So I think that people can key on Odell Beckham Jr. They're not going to let him have those crazy catches. And I think he's going to have a down year for him. He's not going to explode like he did last year. And he's a guy who I think is getting overvalued this season by a lot of fantasy drafters.
Bold. He is going top 20 overall right now. Very bold.
Some are even taking him within the top 10, which is
gotta
insane.
be bold.
But
very bold.
I was actually going to say Victor Cruz, solely because of the targets going to Beckham. But you raise a great point. The guy I'm going to go with, though, is Larry Fitzgerald. He's a guy who's aged in recent years. He's always one of those guys that everyone's like, I need him. You don't need him, though. He's aging. He's not going to make as many plays as he has. And so I'd stay away from him.
That's might be good. Now I'm going to say you have to absolutely stay away from Arian Foster. Got so much hype 2 years ago when he burst onto the scene in Houston. Last year was injured. This year, trying to make a big comeback year. Now, players can do really well on a comeback year. I don't think Arian Foster is going to be that guy. Houston does have Alfred Blue in their backfield to back him up, and I think they're going to handcuff the two, kind of like what DeAndre Williams and John Stewart had in Carolina a few years back. And I think that's really going to hurt his fantasy value. So if you're going to draft him, okay, but draft him late, 8th, 9th round even.
All right. We got to move on to some sleepers, because that's my favorite part of any fantasy draft. So I'm going to go with a few guys playing in the NFC East. I got two for you, right? First guy, Sam Bradford. Wow. This guy's going to put up big numbers. He's going to play in a fast-paced offense, play with his former running mate in DeMarco Murray when they played at Oklahoma. So he's going to be comfortable in the backfield. I think that offensive line can protect him. And once he gets the ball out fast, he's a good quarterback. He just can't move in the pocket, and he keeps getting injured. So if you have those weapons in Philly, they're going to score a lot of points. One of the best things in fantasy, you want an offense that's going to score a lot of points. So that's why I'm going with Bradford. Moving to my other guy, I'm going to have to say Joseph Randle. The Cowboys still have the offensive line that pushed DeMarco Murray to an incredible season. So you're going to see Joseph Randle creating a lot of yards. They're going to score touchdowns. So that's a guy who Tony Romo I think can rely on to sort of break out this year and be a big sleeper. Probably not getting drafted very high in drafts, but that's a guy who could be your RB2, your flex, and I think he'll have a good season.
I'm going to go with Brandon Marshall. Most guys see Brandon Marshall as that guy who always would not get the ball from Jay Cutler. Now he moves into a brand new scenery. He's the lead receiver over there, and Eric Decker is going to free him up a lot, because if you don't cover Eric Decker, he's going to be in the end zone. So I'm going to go with Brandon Marshall, though. I think that a lot of people are undervaluing him, and he's a guy that you should take on your team.
My number one sleeper is going to be John Brown. Currently he's going in the 11th round in a lot of drafts. Personally, I drafted him in my 7th round, and I think I got a steal doing that, because everyone's overlooking him with Larry Fitzgerald, who Brett just advised you guys to stay away from, and Michael Floyd. And those are two big names that are always supposed to do well, but I think really this year is John Brown's year. He's going to have 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, and I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver.
And for the final section of our Fantasy Spotlight on BSPN, we're going to go our favorite fantasy football team names. All right, 2 each, guys. Jeremy?
All right, I'm going to start it off with a corny one. Got to go corn on the cob, Randall Cobb.
Nice.
Hopefully he'll be on my team, so that would be my team name. But that's it. That's my first one. Mike?
I'll probably just go with the classic Blue 42 if I get Alfred Blue in one of the later rounds. How about Mike? To you.
I drafted Megatron, and I went with Calvin and the Chipmunks as my team name.
Okay.
So.
Oh, I got another one for Calvin. The Megawatts, if you're a Houston fan.
All right, Jeremy, you got one?
All right, I got a good one. So I think he's going to have a big year. I'm going to have to go with LeGarrette Blount. Call my team Smoking Blunts.
Very interesting name for that one. And for our final one, we got to go with the former Jets coach, Rex Ryan. If you take his Bills defense, Ryanosaurus Rex. That is the team
Team
name.
That's great.
Ryanosaurus Rex. Stay tuned for more BSPN coverage as we get closer to the NFL season. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at BTV. We'll see you soon.